The morning sun hadn't even properly risen when David stepped out of his basement apartment. He pulled his hood up, not because it was cold, but because it was easier that way. Easier than seeing the looks. Easier than watching people's faces change the moment they noticed him. The scars covered the entire left side of his face and neck. They were thick, twisted reminders of a house fire that had happened 17 years ago, when he was just 12. The flames had taken his mother and left him with a face that made strangers uncomfortable. He'd learned to read people's reactions in seconds. First came the quick glance, then the shock, then the awkward look away. Some people tried to hide it better than others, but it was always there. David walked 3 blocks to the small cafe on Maple Street. He'd seen the help wanted sign in the window 2 days ago. They were looking for someone to wash dishes. Nothing fancy, nothing that required him to interact with customers. Just honest work in the back where nobody had to see him. He'd practiced what he'd say, how he'd keep his scarred side turned slightly away during the interview, how he'd make himself seem as normal as possible. The bell chimed as he pushed open the door. The smell of fresh coffee and baking bread filled his nose. A young woman behind the counter looked up and smiled, but the smile faltered just a bit when she saw him clearly. David was used to that too. "I'm here about the dishwashing position," he said quietly, keeping his voice steady and polite. "Is the manager available?" The woman nodded, still looking uncertain. "Let me get him. Just wait here." David stood by the door, hands in his pockets. A couple sat at a nearby table with their small daughter. The little girl stared at him openly, the way children do before they learn it's rude. Her mother noticed and pulled the child closer, whispering something in her ear. The girl stopped staring but kept glancing back nervously. The manager came out, a middle-aged man with a tired face and flour on his apron. He looked David up and down, and something shifted in his expression. "You're here about the job?" the manager asked. "Yes, sir. I have experience with kitchen work. I'm reliable, I show up on time, and I work hard." The manager scratched his chin, looking uncomfortable. "Look, I appreciate you coming in, but we're actually looking for someone with more formal restaurant experience. Someone who's worked in a professional kitchen before." David felt the familiar sting but kept his face neutral. The sign didn't mention that requirement. "Yeah, well, we decided we need someone with specific experience." "Sorry to waste your time, it was a lie." David could hear it in the man's voice, see it in the way he couldn't quite meet his eyes. The position didn't require experience. It required someone who looked normal enough to not make the staff uncomfortable. "I understand," David said. Because what else could he say? He turned and walked out, the bell chiming again behind him. That made 3 rejections in 5 days. Last week it had been the grocery store. They told him they needed someone more outgoing for the stocking position, even though he'd barely have to interact with anyone. Before that, it was the gas station. They'd said they'd filled the position already, even though the help wanted sign stayed in the window for another week. David walked to the park because he had nowhere else to be. His odd jobs barely paid enough for rent and food. He fixed things for cash when he could find work. Mrs. Peterson down the street hired him sometimes to repair her fence or clean her gutters. She was old, and her eyesight was bad, which probably helped. Mr. Chen at the corner store let him unload deliveries early in the morning before customers arrived. These small mercies kept him going. He sat on a bench near the playground and watched life happen around him. Families were everywhere on this Saturday morning. Fathers pushed their children on swings. Mothers spread out picnic blankets. Teenagers tossed a football back and forth. Normal people living normal lives. A jogger ran past and did a double take when she saw him. She sped up, putting more distance between them. David sighed and looked down at his hands. They were normal hands. Strong, capable hands that could fix almost anything. But nobody wanted to give him the chance to use them. He thought about his mother sometimes. She'd told him that beauty was on the inside, that what mattered was how you treated people. She'd been kind and patient, working 2 jobs to support them after his father left. The fire had started from faulty wiring in their apartment building. She'd thrown him out the window to the firefighters below, saving his life. She hadn't made it out. The foster homes after that had been difficult. Families wanted cute children, easy children, children who wouldn't frighten their own kids or require explanations to neighbors. David had bounced from place to place until he aged out of the system at 18. He'd been on his own ever since, now 34, and still struggling to find his place in a world that judged him in seconds. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. Mister, are you okay? David looked up to see a boy, maybe 7 years old, standing a few feet away. He had a baseball in his hand and grass stains on his knees. I'm fine, buddy. Thanks for asking. The boy tilted his head, studying David's face with the honest curiosity of childhood. Did you get hurt? A long time ago, yeah. Does it still hurt? David considered the question. Not the way you mean. The boy nodded like he understood, even though he probably didn't. My name's Tommy. Want to play catch? Before David could answer, a man came jogging over. Tommy, I told you not to bother people. I'm not bothering him, Dad. I just asked if he wants to play. The father took in David's appearance and his expression tightened. Come on, son. Let's go find your sister. He put his hand on Tommy's shoulder and steered him away. Tommy looked back and waved. David waved back, a small gesture that somehow made the day feel a little less heavy. He stayed on that bench for another hour, watching the world go by. A stray cat, orange and thin, wandered over and rubbed against his leg. David reached down and scratched behind its ears. The cat purred and settled next to him on the bench. You don't care what I look like, do you? David murmured. The cat just purred louder. He'd been feeding this cat for weeks now, leaving scraps of food near his apartment. He'd named it Hope, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe because hope was the one thing he was running short on. As the afternoon stretched on, David finally stood up. Hope jumped down and followed him for a few steps before wandering off toward the street. David headed home, his hands in his pockets, his hood up again. Tomorrow he'd look for more work. Tomorrow he'd face more rejections, more uncomfortable silences, more carefully worded excuses. But today he'd had a moment with a kind little boy and a friendly stray cat. Sometimes that had to be enough. He didn't know that everything was about to change. He didn't know that tomorrow he'd walk into a building where someone would finally see past his scars, where someone would look at him and see not a frightening stranger but a person worth knowing. Tomorrow, his life would begin to shift in ways he couldn't imagine. But tonight he just went home, fed hope, and tried not to think about all the doors that kept closing in his face. The community center on Oak Avenue wasn't the kind of place David usually went. It was always full of people, which meant lots of stares and uncomfortable moments. But Mrs. Peterson had mentioned they served free meals on weekday afternoons and money was getting tight. Really tight. He'd had rice and canned beans for the past 4 days. He stood outside the building for a full 5 minutes before finally pushing the door open. The lobby was bright and welcoming, with colorful artwork on the walls and the sound of laughter coming from somewhere down the hall. A bulletin board advertised everything from yoga classes to job training programs. A woman sat at the front desk, typing on a computer. She was maybe in her early 30s with her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when David approached and he braced himself for the usual reaction, but it didn't come. She just smiled warmly and said, "Hi there. How can I help you?" David hesitated, thrown off by the genuine friendliness in her voice. "I heard you serve meals here." "We do. Lunch is served from noon to 2 on weekdays." "You're just in time." She stood up and gestured down the hallway. "I'm Lisa, by the way. I run this place." "David. Nice to meet you, David. First time here." He nodded, still waiting for her expression to change, for her to find a reason to look away or step back. But Lisa just grabbed a clipboard and walked beside him down the hallway. "We've got a good crowd today. The meal program is open to anyone in the community who needs it. No questions asked, no paperwork required. We just want to make sure people have a good meal." She pushed open a door to a large dining room where about 30 people sat at tables, eating and talking. The smells hit him immediately. Real food, hot food. His stomach growled loudly enough that Lisa heard it and smiled. "Sounds like you're hungry. Go ahead and grab a tray. Today we've got chicken, rice, vegetables, and Maria's famous apple crisp for dessert." David got his food and found a quiet corner table. The chicken was tender and seasoned well. The vegetables were actually fresh, not from a can. He ate slowly, making it last, trying to remember the last time he'd had a meal this good. Lisa moved through the room, chatting with people, checking if anyone needed anything. She stopped at his table. "How's the food?" "It's really good. Thank you." "Maria's a magician in the kitchen." Lisa pulled out a chair. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" David shrugged, confused but not opposed. Nobody usually wanted to sit with him. Lisa settled into the chair with her own plate. "So, David, what do you do?" "Odd jobs, mostly. Fix things, help people move, whatever comes up. Are you looking for something more steady? The question surprised him. Yeah, but that's easier said than done. What kind of work are you interested in? David set down his fork, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. Honestly, anything. I'm not picky. I just want a chance to work. Lisa studied him for a moment, and David realized she was actually looking at him, not at his scars. She was seeing him as a person, considering his words. We've been needing help around here. Maintenance stuff, mostly. Fixing things that break, keeping the place clean, setting up for events. The pay isn't great, but it's steady. 20 hours a week to start. Would you be interested? David's heart jumped. Are you serious? Completely serious. You said you're good at fixing things? I can fix almost anything. Plumbing, electrical, carpentry. I taught myself from library books and online videos. Perfect. When can you start? Right now if you need me. Lisa laughed, a genuine sound that made David's chest feel less tight. How about Monday morning? 8 o'clock? I'll be here, and he was. Monday morning at 7:45, David stood outside the community center, nervous and excited in equal measure. Lisa arrived at 7:50 carrying a large coffee and a bag from the bakery down the street. You're early. I like that. She unlocked the door and handed him the bag. I got extra muffins. Figured you might not have had breakfast. Over the next few weeks, David discovered that Lisa hadn't just given him a job. She'd given him a purpose. The center was always busy, always needing something fixed or cleaned or moved. A leaky sink in the bathroom, wobbly chairs in the meeting room. The stage lights that kept flickering during the kids' theater practice. David fixed them all. He showed up early and stayed late. He found problems before anyone reported them and solved them quietly. The boiler in the basement was making a weird noise. David diagnosed and repaired it, saving the center hundreds in repair costs. The back door wasn't closing properly. David adjusted the hinges and weatherproofed it for winter. Lisa started having coffee with him during his breaks. They'd sit in the small office talking about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in the suburbs, how her parents had wanted her to be a doctor or lawyer, but she'd felt called to social work instead. How they'd been disappointed at first, but eventually came around when they saw how happy it made her. David told her things he hadn't told anyone in years. About the fire. About his mother throwing him to safety. About the foster homes and the constant feeling of being unwanted. About the years of rejection and loneliness. Lisa listened without pity, which David appreciated. She didn't say things like, I'm sorry, or that must have been hard in that tone people used when they didn't really know what to say. Instead, she asked questions. She wanted to understand, not just sympathize. You know what I noticed about you? Lisa said one afternoon as they shared a pizza in the office. What? You're kind. Really kind. I've watched you help people without them even asking. Last week you carried Mrs. Rodriguez's groceries to her car. Yesterday you spent an hour helping that teenager fix his bike chain. You didn't have to do those things. David shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. They needed help, exactly. That's who you are, but I bet most people don't see that, do they? They just see the scars and make assumptions. Pretty much. Their loss, Lisa said firmly. Seriously, David, their loss and my gain. You're the best employee this center has ever had. The other staff members took longer to come around. There was Patricia, the volunteer coordinator, who initially kept her distance and spoke to David in short, clipped sentences. There was Robert, who ran the youth programs and barely made eye contact for the first month. But slowly things shifted. Patricia saw David patiently help an elderly volunteer fix her phone when she couldn't figure out how to call her grandson. Robert watched David organize the sports equipment closet without being asked, making everything accessible for the kids. One by one, the staff began to see what Lisa had seen from the beginning. The real turning point came during a Thursday afternoon when David was fixing a broken window in the gymnasium. A group of teenagers came in for basketball practice, loud and rowdy the way teenagers are. One of them, a tall kid with an attitude, saw David and made a comment to his friends. David didn't hear exactly what was said, but he heard the laughter that followed. Robert, who was supervising the group, stopped the practice immediately. Ryan, my office now. The other kids fell silent. Ryan tried to protest, but Robert wasn't having it. 10 minutes later, Robert came back with Ryan, who looked genuinely ashamed. He walked over to David. I'm sorry, man. That was disrespectful. It won't happen again. David nodded. We're good. After practice, Robert approached David while he was packing up his tools. "I should have said this weeks ago," Robert started, "but I judged you when you first started here. I was wrong. You're good people, David. Better than most." "Thanks," David said simply, because he didn't know what else to say. That evening, as David was locking up, he found Lisa still in her office, buried in paperwork. "You should go home," he said from the doorway. She looked up and smiled tiredly. "Just trying to figure out next quarter's budget. We might have to make some cuts. Anything I can do to help? Unless you can magically make money appear, not really." She rubbed her eyes. "Don't worry, your position is safe. You've made yourself indispensable around here." David thought about the center, about how it had become more than just a workplace to him. It was the first place in years where he felt like he belonged, where people saw him as David, not as the scary guy with the scars. "This place matters," he said, "to a lot of people, including me." Lisa's expression softened. "It matters to me too. That's why I'll figure it out. I always do." As David walked home that night, Hope appeared from the shadows and fell into step beside him. The cat had started following him to and from work, as if she'd appointed herself his companion. "Things are looking up, Hope," David told her. Finally looking up. He had a job. He had friendly co-workers. He had Lisa, who'd become a real friend. For the first time in longer than he could remember, David felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. He had no idea that the center's budget problems were worse than Lisa had let on. He didn't know that difficult decisions were coming, decisions that would test everything he'd built over these past weeks. But tonight, walking home with a stray cat at his heels, David let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. 3 months into the job, David had become part of the center's foundation. He knew which floorboards creaked, which lights flickered before they died, and exactly how to jiggle the temperamental copy machine to make it work. He knew the regulars by name now, and they knew him. Mrs. Rodriguez always asked about Hope and brought cat treats on Wednesdays. Young Tommy, the boy from the park, started coming to after-school programs and would high-five David whenever he saw him. Even the teenagers who'd been wary at first now called out greetings when they arrived for evening activities. But David could sense something was wrong. Lisa had been stressed lately, spending longer hours in her office, her usual smile strained. Staff meetings ran longer and ended with uncomfortable silences. One morning he arrived to find Lisa and Patricia having what looked like a serious conversation. They stopped talking when they saw him. "Morning, David," Lisa said, but her voice didn't have its usual warmth. "Everything okay? Just budget stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." But David did worry. He'd come to care about this place, about the people who depended on it. That afternoon, while fixing a broken desk in the meeting room, he overheard Robert and Patricia talking in the hallway. 3 positions, Patricia was saying. Lisa has to cut 3 positions by the end of the month. The board is pushing for maintenance to go, Robert replied. They think we can just call repair people when we need them. That's ridiculous. David saves us money every week with the things he fixes. Plus, he does so much more than maintenance. I know, but the board doesn't see it that way. Some of them are still uncomfortable with him being around families and kids. David's stomach dropped. He'd been fooling himself, thinking that acceptance from the staff meant acceptance from everyone. The board had been there during events. He'd seen their looks, the way some of them avoided him or shortened conversations when he was nearby. That evening, he waited until everyone else had left before approaching Lisa's office. She was staring at her computer screen, her expression defeated. "How bad is it?" David asked from the doorway. Lisa looked up, startled. "What?" I heard Patricia and Robert talking. "How bad is it?" She sighed and gestured for him to come in. "It's bad. The city cut our funding by 30%. We're losing a major donor. I have to let people go, and the board is making recommendations. They want me gone. Some of them, yes." Lisa's voice was tight with anger. "They're hiding behind budget concerns, but I know what it really is. They think you're a liability. They worry that families won't bring their kids here if you're around. Maybe they're right. Don't." Lisa stood up, fierce suddenly. "Don't you dare think that way. You've been nothing but an asset to this center. You're reliable, skilled, and you treat everyone with respect and kindness. The families who actually spend time here love you, but the board doesn't. The board doesn't know you. They see you at events for 5 minutes and make judgments. They don't see you staying late to make sure the building is safe. They don't see you helping kids with their homework while you're fixing a table nearby. They don't see the real you. David sat down heavily. So what happens now? I'm fighting for you. I've told them I won't make any final decisions until after the annual family event next week. It's our biggest fundraiser and I need all hands on deck anyway. After that, I'll have to present a revised budget to the board. And if they insist? Lisa met his eyes. Then I'll have to make some hard choices. The next week crawled by. David threw himself into preparing for the family event, determined to prove his worth. He repaired old carnival game booths that had been in storage. He strung lights across the gymnasium. He built a small stage for the kids' talent show. He worked from dawn until late evening, driven by a desperate need to show everyone what he could do. Lisa watched him with worried eyes. David, you're going to burn yourself out. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're trying to make yourself essential so they can't let you go. Is it working? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The day of the event arrived. The center was transformed, filled with games, food stalls, and activities. Families poured in, kids running everywhere with face paint and cotton candy. David stayed mostly in the background, making sure everything ran smoothly. A game booth started leaning dangerously. He fixed it. The sound system cut out during a performance? He had it running again in minutes. The outdoor lights weren't working. He tracked down the problem and had them glowing before anyone even noticed they'd been out. He was checking on the refreshment tables when he heard raised voices near the entrance. A woman was arguing with Patricia, her voice high and panicked. She was just here. She was right here. Madison, Madison. David moved closer. The woman was frantic, looking around wildly. Other parents were starting to gather, concerned. My daughter, the woman was saying. She's 4. She was wearing a pink dress. I turned away for 1 second and she's gone. Patricia tried to calm her. I'm sure she's just inside somewhere. The building is secure. Let's organize a search. The woman was crying now, terrified. David approached carefully. What does Madison look like? The woman flinched at his appearance but was too desperate to care. Blonde hair, pink dress with butterflies. She has a stuffed bunny with her. I'll check the back areas, David said. Sometimes kids wander into places they're not supposed to be. He moved quickly through the building, checking closets, storage rooms, the basement, nothing. Then he heard it, a soft crying coming from outside. He pushed open the back door that led to the small garden area the center maintained. It was supposed to be locked during events, but the latch had broken again. There, huddled behind a bush, was a small girl in a pink dress, clutching a stuffed bunny and sobbing. David approached slowly, keeping his voice gentle. Madison? The girl looked up, her face red and tear-streaked. When she saw David, her eyes widened and she cried harder. It's okay, David said softly, staying several feet back. Your mommy is looking for you. She's very worried. I want my mommy, Madison wailed. I know. She's inside. But you know what? I think you're scared right now, and that's okay. Sometimes I get scared too. The girl hiccuped, still crying but listening. David sat down on the ground, making himself less imposing. My face looks scary, doesn't it? Madison nodded, then looked guilty, like she knew she shouldn't agree. That's okay. You can be honest. I got hurt a long time ago and it left these scars. But you know what? I'm still just a regular person. I like cats and pizza and making things work again when they're broken. What do you like? Bunnies, Madison whispered, holding up her stuffed animal. That's a nice bunny. What's its name? Flopsy. That's a great name. David slowly reached into his pocket. I'm going to show you something, okay? Just watch. He pulled out a paper napkin he'd taken from the refreshment table. His mother had taught him origami when he was young and he'd never forgotten. His fingers worked quickly, folding the paper into creases and shapes. Madison watched, fascinated, her crying gradually stopping. In less than a minute, David held out a paper rabbit. For you and Flopsy, a friend. Madison hesitantly reached out and took it. It's a bunny. It is. Do you want to go find your mom now? I bet she really misses you. Madison stood up, still holding both bunnies. She looked at David's face again, really looked this time. Did it hurt when you got your owies? Yeah, it did. But that was a long time ago. My mommy says kisses make owies better. Your mommy sounds smart. Madison walked over and, before David could react, gently kissed the scarred side of his face. Better now. David's throat tightened. Yeah, better now. Come on, let's find your mom. He stood up and held out his hand. Madison took it without hesitation. They walked around to the front of the building where a crowd had gathered. The moment Madison's mother saw her, she screamed and ran forward, dropping to her knees and scooping her daughter up. "Oh, thank God, thank God. Where were you?" "I got lost in the garden," Madison said. "But the nice man found me and made me a bunny." She held up the origami rabbit proudly. The mother looked at David for the first time, really looked at him. She saw the scars, but she also saw her daughter holding his hand trustingly, smiling and unafraid. "Thank you," she whispered, standing up with Madison in her arms. "Thank you so much," and she was scared, David said. She just needed someone to listen. The crowd that had gathered was watching. Several board members were among them, David realized. They'd witnessed the whole thing. They'd seen a terrified little girl accept comfort from someone they'd wanted to dismiss as a liability. One of the board members stepped forward. He was an older man, well-dressed, someone David recognized from meetings. "That was well done, young man. Very well done indeed." The rest of the event passed in a blur. People kept stopping David to thank him. Madison's mother found him later and introduced him to her husband, who shook his hand firmly and told him they'd been planning to make a donation to the center, but now they were doubling it. As the sun set and families began to leave, Lisa found David cleaning up abandoned carnival games. "You did good today," she said quietly. "I just found a lost kid. You did more than that. You showed everyone who you really are." The board members saw it. The families saw it. "You made a difference." "Is it enough?" Lisa smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I have to meet with the board tomorrow, but I think we're going to be okay. I think you're going to be okay." That night, walking home with Hope trotting beside him, David let himself believe it. Maybe, just maybe, he'd found a place where he truly belonged. Maybe acceptance wasn't about changing who he was or hiding his scars. Maybe it was about finding people who could see past the surface to the person underneath. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The budget was still tight, and not everyone would change their minds overnight. But tonight David had hope, and sometimes that was enough. The board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening. Lisa had been in and out of her office all day Monday, making phone calls and reviewing documents. David tried to work as he normally would, but every time he passed her office and saw her stressed expression, his stomach twisted with worry. "Stop hovering," Patricia told him when she caught him lingering near Lisa's door for the third time. "You're making yourself crazy. I just want to know what's happening." Patricia's expression softened. "I know, but Lisa will tell you when there's something to tell. In the meantime, the storage room door is sticking again." David fixed the door, then the wobbly desk in the children's room, then reorganized the supply closet that didn't really need organizing. He was looking for more tasks when Robert found him. "The hoop in the gym is loose," Robert said. "Kids were complaining during practice yesterday. It was a bigger job requiring a ladder and some serious hardware." David was grateful for the distraction. He was up on the ladder tightening bolts when a group of teenagers came in for their after-school program. Tommy was with them, though he was younger than most of the group. "Hey, David," Tommy called out, waving enthusiastically. "Hey, Tommy, how was school?" "Boring. Math is stupid. Math is useful," David said, climbing down the ladder to adjust its position. "I use it all the time. Can't fix things properly without understanding measurements and angles." One of the older teens, a girl named Ashley, came over. "Is it true you saved that little kid at the event?" "I just found her. She wasn't really lost, just scared. Ryan said you were really cool about it, that you made her feel safe." David glanced at Ryan, the teenager who'd made fun of him months ago. Ryan was shooting baskets on the other end of the court, but he caught David's look and nodded respectfully. Anyone would have done the same thing. David said, "I don't think so," Ashley replied thoughtfully. "My little sister gets scared around strangers. She wouldn't have gone with just anyone. You must have been really patient with her." Before David could respond, Tommy interrupted. "Can you teach me how to make those paper animals? The ones you made for Madison? You know about that?" "Everyone knows about it." Madison showed everyone at the park. Now all the kids want them. David couldn't help but smile. "I can teach you. It's called origami. It's not that hard once you learn the basic folds." "Can you teach all of us?" another teenager asked. David looked around at the group that had gathered. 6 teenagers all watching him with interest. No fear in their eyes, no discomfort. Just genuine curiosity. "Sure," he said. "Let me finish fixing this hoop, then I'll show you." 20 minutes later, David sat on the gym floor surrounded by teenagers, demonstrating folds on scrap paper. They struggled at first, their large fingers fumbling with the delicate creases, but they were determined. Tommy managed to create a lopsided crane that he proudly declared was perfect. Ashley made a jumping frog. Even Ryan sat quietly in the back, concentrating on his own creation. Lisa walked into the gym and stopped, taking in the scene. David looked up and saw something in her expression, something that looked like pride mixed with sadness. "Lisa," he called out. "Don't stop on my account," she said, her voice a bit too bright. "This is wonderful." But David could read her well enough now to know something was wrong. After the teenagers got absorbed in their folding, he stood and walked over to her. "What happened?" "Meetings tonight. I'll know more after." "But something already happened." Lisa sighed and pulled him aside, lowering her voice. "The board chair called me this morning. He wanted to give me a heads up. Even after the event, there are still members who are pushing to eliminate your position. They think the center needs to maintain a certain image to attract donors. An image I don't fit. An image that's narrow and outdated," Lisa said fiercely. "But they control the funding, and they're threatening to withdraw support if I don't make the cuts they want." David felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "So I'm gone." "I didn't say that. I said I have a fight ahead of me tonight." "And David, I'm going to fight." "You've earned your place here. These kids love you. The families trust you. The staff depends on you. That has to count for something. But if it comes down to me or the center staying open—" "Don't," Lisa interrupted. "Don't make this about choosing between you and the center. That's not fair to either of us." That evening, David couldn't bring himself to go home. He stayed late, cleaning things that were already clean, checking things that didn't need checking. Hope had followed him to work and now sat on a windowsill, watching him with patient cat eyes. Around 8, the board members started arriving. David recognized several from the event. There was Mr. Henderson, Madison's father, and Mrs. Klein, an older woman who'd been complimentary after the event. But there were others too, people he'd seen looking at him with obvious discomfort or disapproval. He retreated to the basement where he kept his tools and supplies. He couldn't bear to be nearby while they decided his fate. He tried to distract himself by taking apart and cleaning his tool set, but his hands shook. An hour passed. Then another. David sat on an old folding chair, Hope curled up on his lap, and waited. He thought about the past few months, the sense of belonging he'd found, the friendships he'd built, the purpose he'd discovered. The thought of losing it all made his chest ache. Footsteps on the stairs made him look up. Lisa appeared, and her face was carefully neutral. "How bad?" David asked. Lisa sat down on a paint bucket across from him. "It was a fight. A real fight. I presented the numbers showing how much money you save us. I had testimonials from staff. Madison's parents spoke on your behalf, actually showed up to the meeting, which was incredible. Mrs. Rodriguez submitted a letter. Even some of the teenagers wrote statements. But there are 3 board members who absolutely refused to budge. They kept bringing up concerns and image issues and donor relations. The vote was split. David's heart sank. "So I'm out?" "Not exactly." Lisa leaned forward. The board chair suggested a compromise. "They'll keep you on for 6 more months, but with conditions. You'll primarily work early mornings and evenings when fewer families are around. You'll stay in the background during major events. You'll have a probationary period where any complaint about you, any issue at all, could result in immediate termination." David felt anger rise in his throat, hot and bitter. "So I'm good enough to keep around as long as I stay hidden, as long as I don't remind anyone I exist. I know how it sounds. It sounds like I'm being treated like something shameful, like I should be grateful to be tolerated." "You're right," Lisa said quietly. "It's not fair. It's not right. And I told them that. I told them they were making a mistake, that they were letting their prejudices override good sense. But David, it was this or nothing. And 6 months gives us time. Time for what? Time to prove them wrong. Time to build more support. Time to change minds." Lisa's eyes were fierce. "I'm not giving up on this. On you. But I need you to not give up either. Can you do that?" David wanted to say no. He wanted to walk out with his dignity intact, rather than accept such insulting terms. But then he thought about Tommy and Ashley and the other kids. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez and the other regulars who'd come to treat him like family. He thought about Patricia and Robert, who'd become real friends. 6 months, he said finally. But I'm not hiding who I am. I'll work the hours they want, I'll stay in the background at events, but I'm not going to skulk around like I'm ashamed. I wouldn't want you to, Lisa said. David, I'm sorry. I should have fought harder. You fought. That's more than most people would have done. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lisa stood up. Come on. Let's get out of this basement. It's depressing down here. They walked upstairs together. The board members had left, but Patricia was still there, organizing papers at the front desk. She looked up when she saw them. I heard, she said to David. It's garbage. Complete garbage. It's temporary, Lisa said firmly. We're going to change their minds. Damn right we are, Patricia agreed. I'm not watching this place lose the best employee we've ever had without a fight. The next few weeks were strange. David adjusted his schedule, coming in at 6 in the morning and staying until 8 at night with a break during the busy afternoon hours. It felt like regression, like he was being told to hide again, but he refused to let it change who he was. He still helped people when they needed it. He still made origami animals for kids who asked. He still had coffee with Lisa and joked with Robert and helped Patricia with her constantly broken printer. The difference was that he did it all while being acutely aware that he was being watched, judged, evaluated. One morning, he arrived to find graffiti spray-painted on the back wall of the building. Ugly words and hateful symbols. His stomach turned as he read them. Someone had done this because of him. Because he worked here, he was scrubbing at the paint when Lisa found him. Oh God, she breathed. David, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Did you call the police? What's the point? They won't find who did it. Lisa pulled out her phone. I'm calling them anyway. And I'm documenting this. The board needs to see what their compromise is really doing. They're validating people who think this kind of hate is acceptable. The police came and filed a report. Lisa took photos and sent them to every board member with a strongly worded email. By afternoon, Mr. Henderson had called, appalled and apologetic. Mrs. Klein sent a donation with a note saying she was ashamed of what had happened. But not everyone responded. And the graffiti, though cleaned away, left a stain in David's mind. Someone hated him enough to do that. Someone wanted him gone badly enough to vandalize the building. That night, he sat with Hope in his apartment and wondered if it was worth it. If fighting for acceptance in a place where some people would always hate him was worth the pain. He thought about quitting, about just walking away and saving everyone the trouble. But then his phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. Can you teach me more origami tomorrow? I want to make one for my mom's birthday. Then one from Ashley. Thanks for helping me with my college essay today. You're the best. Then one from Lisa. Thinking about you. You're stronger than you know. David looked at his phone, at these messages from people who saw him as more than his scars. People who valued him not despite his appearance, but simply for who he was. Maybe that was worth fighting for. Maybe belonging wasn't about everyone accepting you. Maybe it was about finding the people who did and holding on to them fiercely. He texted back to all three. Simple thank yous that couldn't convey how much their messages meant. Then he scratched Hope behind the ears and made a decision. He wasn't quitting, not yet. Not when there were still people who believed in him. 6 months suddenly didn't seem so long after all. 4 months into the probationary period, something shifted. It wasn't one big moment, but a collection of small ones that added up to real change. It started with the teenagers. Ashley had been working on college applications, and David had helped her brainstorm ideas during his evening shifts. When she got accepted to her first choice school, she insisted on having her photo taken with him, posting it online with a caption about the maintenance worker who'd believed in her when she doubted herself. The post went viral locally with hundreds of comments and shares. Then Tommy's mother, a teacher at the elementary school, asked if David would speak to her class about overcoming challenges. He was terrified, but Lisa encouraged him to do it. He spent an hour with 23rd graders telling them about the fire, about feeling different, about learning that kindness matters more than appearance. The kids asked questions with the brutal honesty only children have, and David answered each one truthfully. When he finished, every single child hugged him. Mrs. Rodriguez organized a petition among the meal program regulars, gathering 200 signatures supporting David's permanent employment. She presented it to Lisa with a speech about how David represented what the center should be about. helping people regardless of circumstances or appearance. The local newspaper ran a story about the community center's programs, and the reporter specifically mentioned David's work, describing how he'd transformed the facility while mentoring young people. The article included a photo of him teaching origami to a group of kids, all of them smiling. But the biggest change came from an unexpected place. The center started a new program for at-risk youth, teenagers who were struggling with everything from homelessness to substance abuse to trauma. These kids were rough, defensive, used to being judged and rejected. They didn't trust easily. Robert asked David to help supervise the program, which met 3 evenings a week. David hesitated, remembering the board's restrictions about staying in the background. But Lisa insisted that his presence could make a real difference. The first night, a kid named Chris walked in, saw David, and immediately turned hostile. "What's wrong with your face, man?" The room went silent. Everyone waited to see how David would react. "House fire when I was 12, David said calmly. "Want to hear about it?" Chris shrugged, trying to act tough, but David could see the curiosity in his eyes. So David told the story, not glossing over the painful parts. He talked about the fire, losing his mother, the foster homes, the years of rejection. He talked about feeling like he'd never belong anywhere. "So what changed?" Chris asked, his hostility fading into genuine interest. "I found people who saw past the surface, and I stopped letting other people's fear define who I was." David met Chris's eyes. "You got scars too. Maybe not ones people can see, but they're there. This program, this place, it's about helping each other heal. You willing to try?" Chris didn't answer right away, but he didn't leave either. Over the following weeks, he became one of the program's most dedicated participants. He started coming in early to help David set up, asking questions about tools and repairs, learning skills that might lead to employment. One evening, Chris arrived with a black eye and split lip. He tried to brush it off, but David pulled him aside. "What happened?" "Nothing. Just some guys from my old neighborhood." "Why were they after you?" Chris looked away. "I used to run with them. Deal drugs, steal stuff, whatever. But I'm trying to change, you know? Trying to be better. They don't like that. They think I'm disrespecting them by leaving." David saw himself in Chris's struggle, the fight to become someone different than what the world expected. It's hard walking away from what people think you should be. How did you do it? Like, everyone sees you and makes assumptions. How do you deal with that every day? "Some days better than others," David admitted. "But I remind myself that their assumptions are their problem, not mine. I know who I am. The people who matter know who I am. Everyone else, their opinion doesn't change my worth." Chris nodded slowly. "I want to be like that. Confident, you know? Not caring what people think. It's not about not caring. It's about caring more about who you really are than who they think you are. Big difference." That conversation stayed with David. He realized that working with these teenagers wasn't just about helping them. It was helping him too, forcing him to practice the confidence he preached. If he wanted them to believe they could change and grow, he had to believe it about himself. The 6-month evaluation was scheduled for a Tuesday. Lisa had been preparing for weeks, compiling evidence of David's impact. She had testimonials from staff, families, and program participants. She had the newspaper article, the petition, Ashley's viral post. She had financial records showing how much money David had saved the center. She had everything except a guarantee. The night before the meeting, David couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling while hope purred on his chest. He thought about the 2 paths ahead of him. If they let him go, he'd be back where he started, looking for odd jobs, facing rejection after rejection. If they kept him, he'd have security, community, purpose. But something had changed in him over these months. He wasn't the same person who'd walked into the community center 10 months ago, desperate and hopeless. He'd found his strength, his voice, his worth. Regardless of what the board decided, he wouldn't lose that. He couldn't go back to being the person who hid from the world. Lisa called him at noon on Tuesday. "Can you come to the center? The board wants to speak with you." David's heart pounded as he walked the familiar route. When he arrived, Lisa met him at the door. Her expression was unreadable. "What happened?" he asked. "They want to hear from you directly. They have questions." The conference room felt too small with all 12 board members seated around the table. David recognized most of them now. Mr. Henderson gave him an encouraging nod. Mrs. Klein smiled. But others looked skeptical or uncomfortable. The board chair, a stern woman named Ms. Walker, gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit down, David." He sat, his hands folded on the table, trying to appear calm even though his pulse raced. "We've reviewed Lisa's report," Ms. Walker continued. "It's quite comprehensive. But we want to hear from you. Tell us in your own words what this job means to you." David took a breath, gathering his thoughts. 10 months ago, I was invisible. Not because of how I look, but because people chose not to see me. They saw the scars and decided they knew everything about me. This place, this job, it gave me a chance to be seen. Really seen. Not just as the maintenance guy, but as someone who matters. Someone who can make a difference. And the incidents? Another board member asked. The graffiti, the concerns some families have expressed? There will always be people who judge based on appearance, David said honestly. I can't control that. But I can control how I respond. I can show up every day and do my job well. I can treat people with respect and kindness. I can be someone the kids in our programs can look up to, especially the ones who feel different or unwanted. I can't change my face, but I can change what it represents. Not a reason to be afraid, but a reminder that we're all dealing with something, and we're all worthy of acceptance. Ms. Walker studied him for a long moment. You've certainly made an impact. The question is whether it's the right impact for our organization. With respect, David said, his voice steady. I think the question is what kind of organization you want to be. One that hides anyone who doesn't fit a certain image? Or one that actually practices the inclusion and acceptance you claim to value? The room went quiet. Lisa looked like she might cry or cheer, possibly both. Ms. Walker's expression softened slightly. That's a fair point. Thank you, David. We'll deliberate and let Lisa know our decision. David left the room and waited in the hallway with Lisa. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Finally, the conference room door opened and Ms. Walker emerged. Lisa, David, please come back in. They returned to find the board members' expressions had shifted. Several were smiling. Ms. Walker stood. David, we voted to offer you a permanent full-time position. No probation, no restrictions. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. We're also increasing your responsibilities and your salary. Lisa has proposed that you become the facilities manager and youth mentor coordinator. The board has approved this promotion. David felt Lisa grab his hand and squeeze. He couldn't quite process the words. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept, Mr. Henderson said warmly. My daughter still talks about you. She told her entire preschool class that the bravest person she knows is the man with the scars who makes paper bunnies. I accept, David managed, his voice rough with emotion. After the board members left, offering congratulations and handshakes, David sat alone with Lisa in the empty conference room. You did it, Lisa said softly. We did it, David corrected. You fought for me when you didn't have to. You saw something in me when everyone else looked away. Lisa's eyes were bright with tears. I saw who you really are. I just helped other people see it too. That evening, David walked home with a lightness in his step he hadn't felt in years. Hope appeared from her usual hiding spot and fell into step beside him. When he got to his apartment building, he found a group of teenagers from the program waiting on the steps. Chris stood at the front holding something. We heard, Chris said, grinning, about the promotion. We wanted to give you this. He handed David a frame. Inside was a photo from the youth program. All the teenagers gathered around David as he demonstrated how to fix a bicycle. But they decorated the frame with origami figures, dozens of paper cranes and animals in every color.